So, for those of you, hopefully you're in the right space. This is S11 STEM's mini branches, college planning for STEM majors. In case you didn't hear that QR code, you scan that, fill out that form. I'm happy to send you a copy of the slides tomorrow. My name is Nicole Pilar. I am based in Irvine, California. I work for an organization called Collegewise. I work with a lot of STEM students. This is one of my favorite topics. And I get to be hanging out here with one of my favorite people, Taylor Patterson.
Hello, everybody. My name is Taylor Patterson. The big title, the long title, is Assistant Director, Southern California Regional Representative. I work for Purdue University. I am based out here in Southern California. I live up in Long Beach, but basically now cover the whole state of Hawaii as well as California. I answer a lot of questions about STEM. I also specifically read for the College of Engineering, so I've been diving into reviewing applications for that specific college, as well as the Honors College this year. We're going to get started. Perfect. You want to go over that?
Okay, so quick overview of what we hope to accomplish. So by the end of this presentation, our hope is that you have a solid understanding of what does the acronym STEM mean. A lot of students seem to assume it is only technology and engineering, and they forget the S and the M. Additionally, I think it's very important that students, as you consider whether or not you want to pursue STEM, have a good understanding of what does it actually mean to do that at the college level. It's a very different experience than potentially high school. How are STEM programs treated differently in the admissions process? It feels that computer science has become the sexiest thing under the sun to every single high school student in terms of major. As a result, most STEM majors are becoming a little bit different in terms of admission review. And then how can you as students best prepare for this process? How can you, as you think about what you want to study and where you want to go in the future, how can you best prepare? I want to take a quick poll though. Who in here is a senior? Of the students, who's a senior? Yeah! Congratulations, you made it past November 1st. Mostly intact. We're juniors. Where are my juniors at? My sophomores. And my wonderful first years. All right, so that's next. Okay.
Oh, acronyms. I feel like more and more you're going to be getting used to these acronyms. They're used in the higher education realm. STEM is a big one, and STEM encompasses a lot of different things for only being categorized of 4 different letters. So science, number 1, technology, engineering, and math. I've heard STEAM. Have you heard STEAM before? Put the College of Agriculture in there as well. This encompasses a lot of things. Today we're going to be going over each individual letter from an academic standpoint, and then also what that looks like at the college level. Oh my gosh, I forgot about our little picture brought to you by Purdue University. This is a really just fun exercise that they do during one of the information sessions on campus to really bring it all home. So one thing that I am very passionate about, besides higher education, being an admissions counselor, is ice cream. So this is just really putting it in context of what the science, technology, engineering, and math, even though math isn't on there, but we're going to put it. Yes. They're going to run off this. So first of all, we're going to open an ice cream shop. I know that Nicole and I are going to make a little stop at Salt and Straw, so maybe we'll be the next big competitors. But we are going to be looking at the science of ice cream. We want to look at the elements of those ingredients. Raise your hand if your favorite flavor is vanilla. Nobody. Okay, few chocolate. Anything crazy like snickerdoodle or like chocolate chip cookie dough? A bunch of, I don't know. I'm like a pretty straight just chocolate girl myself. But we're going to need to be finding all those ingredients and what it's actually like to make that ice cream. We're then going to be looking at our engineering team and going to be, what are those recipes like and what is it going to be like to consistently make a bunch of batches. I know if I go, I want a consistent chocolate ice cream cone. If my ice cream shop ends up being my favorite, I want it to be good every single time. I don't want to go, I was recently at an ice cream shop up in Northern California and there were like ice chunks in it. I don't like that. The engineering team, I would not gone there and would have been, what the heck, guys? We want the consistency throughout. For the technology, so we are going to be needing the consistent batches. We are also going to be wanting to develop new flavors. I know a lot of places will have the seasonal. I know it's like transitioning maybe from like pumpkin to peppermint.
Holiday flavors are at Starbucks starting today, friends.
Starting today, she would know. She would know. And then again, for those math, they're going to be the accountants. They're going to be analyzing all the data of what our ice cream shop all entails.
So to dive into this a little bit more as to how you as students should see this. I work with a lot of STEM students, and one of the big questions I ask them is not, what do you want to study in college, but rather, what problems are you most interested in solving? Anybody that works in STEM is going to be working typically on a project. As I also like to say, STEM is a team-based sport. I particularly love science because science is arguably of the acronym the most flexible for students. You can do so much within science disciplines. And because most of you are in high school, you probably know the kind of common ones, right? The Holy Trinity, bio, chem, and physics, which is great. But at the same time, most problems and most issues that you will be encountering if you decide to go into science are interdisciplinary. So for example, I have a student that is incredibly passionate about trying to understand, can we have life go on Mars? Well, she's probably going to need to take a little bit of planetary science. She's probably going to need to do a little bit of geology. She'll likely need to do a little bit of astrobiology. She's probably need to know a little bit about chemistry. You've got to be able to breathe there, right? When I think about kind of some of the common, less common majors, you'll see things like planetary science, forensic science. I'm going to need to know bio. I'm going to need to know chemistry. I'll definitely also need to know a little bit of physics there, but I'm going to need to know some sociology, maybe some criminology. When I think about entomology, anyone know what entomology is? Study of bugs. The biggest export, biggest economic impact in California is what? What industry? Huh? Agriculture. You want to make a ton of money? Start studying bugs, because let me tell you, they are taking over our world, especially as we're experiencing climate change. I think the same thing about crop science. Full disclosure, I am from Northern California. I'm from Sonoma County, so if any parents here need wine recommendations to get you through college application season, please see me at the end. But that is a huge multi-million-dollar industry, understanding how we're going to feed ourselves. You all know about like Impossible and Beyond Burgers? Maybe? Yeah, let's go study crop science to some extent, right? And then speech and hearing science is something that a lot of students, if you want to work with people to help them in terms of like audiology and helping students, maybe a few of you in this room, maybe struggle to speak when you were first starting off. Most folks that go into school-based settings are studying speech and hearing science. There's a lot of biology, there's a lot of understanding about the structures of the brain and how it relates to hearing and the mouth and whatnot. My dentist actually studied speech and hearing science as her undergrad. And so when I had to get like the tooth stuff done, it was like very helpful. So I would say for most students, I really love science because if there's a problem or an issue that you're really passionate about, you can probably find a major at a college campus that will focus on that and have opportunities within that program to really focus on like, what that problem is and prepare for the future. All right, Taylor, you ready to do engineering and tech?
We'll start out. I guess a little bit of my forte. So technology, I think this is one that is like lesser known in the realm, but we use technology literally every single day. Our cell phones had more technology than the first moon landing, to put it in perspective. Neil Armstrong, Purdue alum, little backside running on tours, right? So technology, you're going to see, we're going to talk about engineering technology itself, but also these less common majors. At Purdue, the College of what we call Polytechnic Institute, formerly known as our College of Technology, is home to a lot of different categories of majors. One of them is going to be our aviation programs, so if you want to become a professional airline pilot, but also if you want to work for an airline, want to work for an airport. I also want to talk about the engineering technology programs, and there's a whole slide dedicated to that. Also, food science and technology, construction management. There's a program at Purdue that, yes, we're going to build buildings and less of the architecture side, but what does it look like to actually be kind of the project manager for those construction buildings? What is it like to build something, and what is it going to look like when it breaks? We live in a state that is very heavily impacted by earthquakes, and that's going to be a little bit different in California than it is in a place like the Midwest where we have things like basements there, right? A little bit different. Any cool technology stories that you have with your students that you work with?
So full disclosure, I am one of 5 children in my family. All 4 of my siblings work in either science or technology. I'm also a scientist, a social scientist. I study political science and economics. Yes, that is a real science, to be very clear. It's very real science. My sister works as a hydrogen fuel cell engineer for Toyota. Her car outside the garage, she was responsible for designing the fueling system both at the gas tanks, or excuse me, in the gas tank and also at the gas stations. And one of the things that we talk about a lot with engineering and engineering technology is that there's 2 fundamental differences. And Taylor and I talk about this all the time. The engineers are the ones that are conceptually designing the car. But the engineering technologists are the ones that are figuring out how do we produce that car? How do we actually create it to market? How do we source those things? And so when you think about especially the T and the E, I think a lot of parents assume that, oh, my kid studies engineering technology, they're not going to make as much money. False, in fact, in many, many ways. It's just that the focus of the roles are going to be very different. My sister works with a ton of engineering technologists. She can't design the next level of Y if she goes to her team and is like, hey, here are all the bells and whistles I want to make. And they're like, we're not going to be able to produce that on that timeline at that cost link. Like, not at all. So in a lot of ways, I like to tell some students, especially if you're interested in STEM, most engineering technology programs are going to have a little bit less math because, again, you're not conceptualizing a brand new idea. You're putting it into practice. So sometimes when I work with my students that are interested in going into engineering or really just making things, I'm like, let's look at some engineering technology programs because they're going to be a little bit more hands-on in terms of the nature of it and less conceptual. But at the same time, you're going to have both engineers and engineering technology majors in the same class. So think of it this way. If I'm designing a building, for example, and I have engineers and engineering technologists, the engineers are going to be focusing more on the architecture. They're going to be focusing more on the conceptualized design. Whereas an engineering technologist is going to be like, okay, once you guys get your base idea for that building, I need to start figuring out how do I actually produce this? How do I build this? How do I do it at cost? How do I get the materials? Notice how both of these groups need to work together, though. So you'll find that oftentimes there's a lot of overlap in curriculum sometimes, but at the same time, there's quite a few differences. Engineering.
The one that gets its own parade and the fireworks show at the end, I would say out of STEM, this is definitely one of the biggest highlights. You're going to see common majors. I think the programs that I get asked about a lot are going to be the mechanical, aerospace, astronautical, civil being up there too. You're also going to see some less common major examples as well. As Nicole was saying, kind of comparing and contrasting an engineering and technology, this is going to be diving into math and science courses for what probably seems for undergraduate students in these programs for the rest of their lives. It is going to be, it's beyond what I can even conceptualize from a math class, and those science courses too. Something unique of, because there are a lot of students that don't have access to really understanding a lot of these different types of engineering programs, are there going to be general engineering programs that allow students to explore. That's the type of program that Purdue has because we don't expect students to know the ins and outs of those 17 engineering majors. So we essentially give them a year to choose. Not all programs are set up like that. There are going to be more that are kind of coming on board with that because students don't know, and kind of the ones that are nautical and mechanical, some of the larger programs are going to have kind of the most energy kind of backing them. But again, there are just as many students studying biomedical engineering working on prosthesis. There are going to be, and there are engineers that are working on studying nanoplastics in the ocean, plus a lot of different stories. So I know that you have an interesting story with working with students in the engineering realm.
I think the big thing, I love working with engineering students. One thing that I would encourage you to think about, you'll notice that we have some less common major examples. The reality though is that for most engineering students, and I'd argue for most STEM students, you all have to take the basics first. Like you can't study genetics as an undergraduate major. I need to teach you basic biology and organic chemistry first before I get to do the fun stuff. So oftentimes I'll have a student that comes in and says, well, I want to do biomedical engineering. And I think biomedical engineering is great. I love pacemakers. They're fantastic things. Hopefully I never need one. But the reality is I need to teach a kid electrical or mechanical engineering first. Biomedical engineering, most students aren't going to get into that curriculum really in terms of the specialized disciplines until maybe end of sophomore year, beginning of junior year. Oftentimes what you'll find is that most schools will have the kind of common engineering majors, but they may have tracks for specific opportunities for students to specialize. So students don't assume that you can't go, that in order to become an aerospace engineer, you have to study aerospace engineering. That is patently false. It is going to be based on a combination of what electives maybe did you take advantage of later in college, what internships, and what other opportunities did you take advantage of during breaks and whatnot. I think the big thing I always encourage students to think about when it comes to engineering is, again, really be diving into what does your portfolio look like? What are you doing extracurricularly outside of the classroom? Again, my sister works for Toyota. Her background is in mechanical engineering. Her entire way of getting into that was through all of the co-ops and internship opportunities she took advantage of when she was in college. She had other friends that went and worked in bioscience. Another friend of hers actually went and helped create some of the HEPA filters that we see on the airplanes that were kind of important in the last few years, if I remember correctly. To kind of re-emphasize this, we've got this really cool graph, or rather, this is from Purdue. You can see that there are multiple kind of overlaps between the technology and the engineering spaces. I'll let Taylor talk about them more.
Okay. So at Purdue, you'll see there are 17 engineering majors. I did not put interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, but I did just get a big lesson on the differences between those. And then those are going to be the 14 engineering technology programs. The bold are are going to be those overlaps. And that was really what Nicole was talking about before, of the interest, the career paths for both of these, for all these programs can lead and will lead to engineer and the title. And that's what's really a great transition. This is a visual of what Nicole was explaining, of seeing the engineering education over on the right side. You'll see that theoretical research being all the way on the side of that spectrum. It's going to be very theory driven, and you'll see distribution and sales on the other side. Our students overlapping in those, but students with engineering technology degrees and degrees in engineering are obtaining that career and that job title, which I feel like is really important to students when they're going through this application process. And this really is a great visual of where that focus lies, because students are like, I want to be an engineer, but in which realm? In which realm of this is really the interest kind of diving into? And so a great visual when you're going through this process of learning about academic programs available at schools of what is offered. And I have a student, he was a homeschool student from Pasadena that I was working with. He's now in the fall of his senior year and was like just an all-star. He was doing some of the classes were actually taught by Caltech professors, just was into research, was rebuilding antique cars and transitioning them into battery-operated vehicles as like a passion. He's an all-star. He's like, I want to be an engineer. I know I want to be an engineer. Went through our first year engineering program and was like, this isn't really the lens of engineering I want to be looking at. I'm going to actually change this major into one of the engineering technology programs, because he's like, I'm looking and students don't care how they were working on a project, how this item fits in their hand. They don't care what color it is. They just want to design it. And he's like, I want to be that interceptor between what it actually comes through and what it is like for people in the industry, and having a little bit more of a personal conversation and connection with industry in that capacity. So he will be graduating with, I believe, mechanical engineering technology at the end of this year. So shout out to Charlie.
Just to reiterate, again, you're going to see there are differences between a BS and a BSc. Some of you, well, that's the type of degree. A BS is a Bachelor of Science. A BSc is a Bachelor of Science or Engineering. There is literally no difference. An employer will not care whether you have a BS or a BSc. It really just translates to what is the core in terms of the coursework that you're taking. Oftentimes, I tell students the biggest tip I can give you when you're evaluating programs: look at the course plan, look at the degree plan. I have students every year, they're like, well, I want to study business, but I don't want to do math. I'm like, how do you feel about doing calculus 1 your first semester, right? Or maybe you're a student that's like, I don't really want to do physics, but I want to be a biology major. You're going to be doing a whole series of physics as part of your bio major. So it's really important when you're looking at the descriptions of the majors and you're looking at the programs of study that they align with what your focuses are.
I would also really give a shout out to all the admission counselors that are at those college fairs that come and visit schools in this area all the time. The admission counselors are a great way of, if a student comes to me and they're like, I want to study business, but I don't want to study math, we have other business majors that are going to be less math intensive. So utilizing that as another resource going through this process.
I always get the S and the M because they scare me, the technology and engineering, but math is my least favorite too. So common majors, you're going to see things like economics and of course mathematics. I see students every year, they're like, Nicole, I really, really love math, so I guess I have to do computer science, or I guess I have to do engineering. Patently false. I love mathematics because it truly is, again, similar in the sense that you can really customize it to what you want. Data science, economics. I have a friend of mine that did neuroscience and data science double major. She now works for Target. She basically analyzes what goes on sale at the beauty aisle. I get some really great coupons as a result of that relationship. Very excited this upcoming week. But there's a ton of different ways that I think as students, if you really love numbers, you can do that either in an applied sense or you can also do it in a theoretical sense, right? Math is truly the global language, I would make the argument. And so as a result, I find a lot of students really being able to kind of customize that based off of their interests and their opportunities in college. Of course, you'll see things like mathematics and secondary education. We desperately need better math teachers in America. Financial mathematics and statistics, if you compare that with computer science, trust me, Goldman Sachs will happily hire you. If you can get a minor in neuroscience, even better. Most things done in finance are now done completely via AI or machine learning in many ways. There is still human elements, but a lot of it is pure data science and numbers. And then actuarial science. How many of you have a teen driver at home, and as a result, your car insurance shot through the roof? Yes, an actuary decided that your child is more risky, so you have to pay more money. Actuaries are the folks that determine risk. Anybody here worried about wildfires? Yeah, it's a thing, right? Actuaries are making boatloads of cash, partly because of climate change. They're the folks that analyze how much we are going to pay for insurance or other type of risk activities. So, for example, if I wanted to insure my voice, how much is it worth? I'm going to go to an actuary. All right. Another way to think about this is if you're interested in science, the types of things is how and why does this work? How do we create a COVID vaccine that works? What is the way in which it will affect us? Technology, how do I actually apply this to produce something? How do I make sure that once I get that recipe for a vaccination, how do I make sure I'm able to produce it at scale? Engineering, how can I use this in general, either conceptually or in practice? And then I would say with math, it's either applied or theoretical. Maybe you're somebody that's really passionate about understanding how geometry and knot theory works. That's going to be more theoretical math. Or maybe you're somebody that's like, how can I utilize oil prices as a way of maximizing my currency valuations? That's going to be more of an applied mathematical area. Again, the biggest piece of advice I can say is always check the curriculum. Always, always, always. We're going to do a quick stop into BA versus BS for the sake of time. If you're a student that particularly wants to study multiple things, a Bachelor of Arts degree is probably going to be a better fit for you. Typically, a BA is going to have less science and math classes. That does not mean that it is any less than a degree. You can go to medical school with a chemistry BA degree. It just generally means that it's a good fit for a student that maybe is like, I want to do science, but I'm also really passionate about Italian. Or I really love science, but I'm also really interested in sociology. A chemistry BS degree is going to require typically more math and science classes, and it's going to be a little bit more lab-based. Maybe a student that may have multiple interests is going to have to settle for a minor. They're not going to be able to double major typically. Most schools will offer both. Some will offer one or the other. Doesn't mean it's bad. We always check the curriculum. Want to talk about classes? What's up?
Okay. You can see, take the most demanding math and science courses. You'll hear the A through G thrown at you a lot throughout this process in high school. This is pretty similar. I would say I'm not going to fact check this for sure. I would always encourage students to take 4 years of science. As Nicole was saying before, it's usually chemistry, biology, and physics, but I know that there are a lot more opportunities in that realm from a course perspective. Also, other coursework, again, these are going to be the requirements for graduating from high school, but during the review process, students will be reviewed what's available in the realms of the high school, and then making sure to be a competitive applicant that they are taking the most demanding curriculum overall.
I want to add something because I know we're here at CTE night. Students typically, depending on the selectivity of the program, your CTE classes should not replace core math and science coursework. You should be taking math, like traditional math. We're talking algebra, geometry, algebra 2, pre-calc, trigonometry, calculus. If you can get access to it. Let's talk about calculus for a second, because everybody seems to believe that we have a race to 80 calc, right? Patently false. Students are evaluating the context of their environment and the context of the opportunities they had access to them. My expectation as an admissions officer is the student continue along the pathway. If they chose to accelerate, I'm really curious to know why. But I'm expected to typically have a student, particularly if you're going into technology and engineering, they need to be what's called calc ready, meaning they need to have gone through at least what is the equivalent of pre-calculus, so math 3, depending on how your guys' high school does it. But CTE classes in particular are great from an elective perspective. Most engineering programs are going to require students to have at least taken bio and chemistry. Many are also physics for engineers, meaning that those CTE classes cannot replace those core lab required classes. They are fantastic opportunities. I highly recommend that you take advantage of them. But they should be in addition of, not necessarily in place of. Does that make sense? Additionally, don't skimp on this stuff. Remember how I told you that STEM is a team sport? My sister just went to 3 different continents in the last 2 months. She had to go to Japan, she had to go to South America, she had to go to Germany. I have a student, he's actually studying genetics, ironically, doing pretty cool genetic research up at UC Irvine. Very, very passionate about biological sciences. But he also realized that in order to understand a paper that was written about Alzheimer's, his grandfather had it, that inspired him to get into genetics research. It was in German. So one summer he decided to teach himself German. It's the second most commonly cited language for academic papers and journals. And so he realized, my little beautiful Sri Lankan kid decided that he's not only going to learn English, he's not only going to know his parents' mother's tongue, he's also going to learn German. Then he decided that he wanted to just do Welsh and Portuguese for the fun of it, because he loves patterns and pattern recognition, and then that turned into a really cool essay about phonetic code. Right? Students, do not think that you just have to be math and science all the time. I would argue the best engineers, the best mathematicians, and the best scientists, the best engineering technologists are not just one thing. Right? Fun fact, the CEO of Apple didn't even study STEM, he studied supply chain management. Why? They got to figure out how to get things from multiple places to multiple places. Right? There are many paths to get to where it is that you want to work, but you cannot forget these things because they will help make you interesting in the review process, but also more interesting when you get into the profession. Here, this one.
Okay, so the title of the slide is Purdue Engineering Requirements. These are going to be requirements for any student applying to any major at the university. This is things that I talk about quite often. So it's going to be 4 years of math, 4 years of English, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, and then 2 years of the world language at minimum. There are going to be students that meet and exceed, they have to meet, but also going to be exceeding those requirements. You can see it's pretty small, the enrollment for, this is class of 2021. This is the biggest class. You can see it's over 10,000 students. We had 59,000 applications. For last year's application cycle, we had 67,000. And being November 1st, I actually didn't check the numbers because I didn't get there yet. But you can see that middle 50%, we list the middle 50% GPA, ACT, and SAT scores, and that is for all programs. There are going to be programs at Purdue and usually any school that are going to be more competitive, that are going to be on maybe the higher end of the spectrum overall. Again, I read specifically for the College of Engineering, and for those math and science course requirements, I would say a majority of students are exceeding these by a long shot.
I wanted to do a comparison. Full disclosure, I have nothing to do with Cornell. I just love it. Go Big Red. Any Office fans in here? Andy? No? Thank you. Thank you, Lincoln. Appreciate it. Some schools are very, very particular about what they want. Cornell is straight up, you have to have this math and science curriculum. If you do not have it, you will not be considered eligible for our College of Engineering. Fun fact, it's typically the professors, not the admissions officers, that determine what this is, so don't yell at them too badly if you don't have these things at the table. They are just the messengers. Cornell is very particular. They would like 4 units of mathematics, and one of them must include calculus. So if you are a student that is not on track to finish calculus by the end of high school, and you want to go to Cornell Engineering, you're going to figure out a way to accelerate and make that happen, unfortunately. Additionally, they require a unit of physics and a unit of chemistry. They also recommend computer science and biology. This is an interesting one. They require physics and chemistry, but they only recommend biology. By the way, recommend, you want to go to engineering at Cornell, is it really recommend? No, you should probably try if you can. If you have access to that coursework, you should try to do that. I think the big thing I like to tell students is a couple questions you want to ask when you're talking to our local admissions reps. One, do you admit by major or by college? So at Cornell, they have multiple schools, multiple colleges. Students are evaluated based off of the major associated with the college that they are applying to. That's not true at every other school. Some schools you're evaluated just everybody is together. You can figure it out when you get there, right? Other institutions, they will admit maybe by college, maybe not. It depends on the major, right? So for example, the University of Washington, go Huskies. Any Washington grads here? Maybe? Okay. The University of Washington, we're planning on applying into the School of Computer Science, the School of Information and Computer Sciences. Every single student is competing against the other student, competing is the wrong word, but you're evaluated against every other student for that specific major. So all the kids, it's like that competitive. Meaning if you're applying to informatics, you're going in evaluation for informatics. If you're doing computer science, you're going to computer science. Fun fact, the out-of-state admit rate for computer science at the University of Washington last year, 3%. This is why you don't look at the overall admit rate when evaluating colleges. Because the admit rate for certain programs of study are different depending on how they admit students. You see Irvine admits by major across the board. Every single major is evaluated independently. Meaning that, if I play global studies, they have a 36% admit rate. But if I'm applying to computer science, it has 12. In my world, any school that has a 20% or below admit rate for either the school or the program is automatically a breach. I don't care if you have a Nobel Prize, it is still a breach. Because they have too many bodies in that instance. And that means that for those of you in this room, if we know that STEM programs are like the new hot thing that everybody wants, you need to build your list strategically. We need to be thinking strategically about making sure that you are asking the right questions at those college fairs, because those overall admit rates can lie, as we just demonstrated. But also that you're picking programs in schools that are going to fit you and what you want in terms of programs, and what you're looking for in terms of college experience. The last thing I will say is the name of the college, particularly in STEM, does not always guarantee opportunity. Of the top 10 backgrounds for undergraduate that go into work into Silicon Valley, 2 of the top 10, ASU, San Jose State. Why? Berkeley doesn't produce enough engineers for that industry. They have to start pulling from other places, right? Cal Poly's slow. I like to be able to say like a third of the kids they hire at Apple are slow grads. It's not exactly false. They tend to do pretty well there. So where you go to college doesn't necessarily always determine what your opportunity is, particularly with STEM. My sister went to a college called Kettering University. It used to be the apprenticeship school for General Motors. They know a thing or two about cars there, right? So you really want to be thinking not only students about like where you are going, what the opportunities are there, but also how are they connecting you in terms of translating that in applications for jobs, in applications for internships. And those are some really great questions to ask people like that. Let's talk really quickly about how you can prepare outside of class. So we talked about how you need to take some core math and science classes, but let's say you do some elective slots. I love CTE programs. It gives you the hands-on experiences. You guys have access to that coursework here, particularly related to STEM and engineering and technology and whatnot. Those are fantastic opportunities. And again, we evaluate you in the context of your environment. If you had the opportunity to take advantage of some of that, and you chose to, that's good. It's a great thing. Those are potential essay opportunities. Those are potential interview topics in the past. Additionally, I am really passionate about students in outside of classes. Are there clubs or other sports that you might be able to do? Esports are becoming the new hot thing I'm finding. Yes, you can put video games on your applications, kids. I'm so sorry, parents, that you can't do that. However, it has to be video games with purpose. All right, you can't just be locked in the basement, eating a bunch of ramen and playing with buttons. All right, you got to do it with like a purpose. So here's my pro tip: create a League of Legends tournament with a charity component. It counts as volunteering. You're doing good for the community. You can tell mom, I have purpose for playing this game. But if you are somebody that spends a lot of time doing that, and it's a huge part of your naturally ranked or whatever, absolutely throw it on your application. There's also schools that will recruit you for those things. Additionally, I like to say the informal activities count too. I think a lot of parents assume that kids' hobbies don't. I had a student a couple years ago that decided she was really interested in like making things. She also really loved astronomy. I love astronomers. She built a ham radio in her garage. Mom hated me because I encouraged it. She couldn't go away. She couldn't park her car in there for 2 months. But she talked to astronauts twice. You can call the International Space Station with the right frequencies. I didn't think that was really cool, by the way. Like, I totally thought it. You can do it, right? That turned out to be an incredible essay of hers because she learned a lot about welding. She learned a lot about soldering. She was great material for her electrical engineering. She's very happy at Columbia. The big thing is, I think as students, you really want to be looking at how are you spending your time outside of your classes? How does it relate to what you want to study? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do everything STEM. That captaincy of the water polo team, your ability to manage teams. Like I said, STEM is a team sport. How many of you in this room, parents, work in a STEM field? How many of you, keep your hands up, how many of you work completely solo, independent, no team whatsoever? You will be the exception to the rule. Okay? The last thing I'm going to let Taylor finish this up here. I think the six skills that I would say the strong applicants demonstrate. Number one, patience. Nothing comes quickly. I know it seems like the COVID vaccine was like super quick, but that was actually rapid because we gave so much money to it. But especially if you're doing something like a STEM role, it's not going to come to you immediately. So I, as an admissions officer, need to know that, like, do you have the patience? Because you will fail a lot in your left. Are you creative? How do you demonstrate that creativity? Are you in the arts? Are you in music? Do you just like creating like YouTube videos for fun with your friends? Are you super passionate on TikTok with like, I don't know, crazy skateboarding tricks? Can you communicate? Some of my favorite engineering students, not only because they put together really strong applications that got handed, but they do speech and debate. I tell all of my science students, I said, you need to learn how to communicate your ideas. You need to be able to advocate for yourself, especially if you want to go into the sciences, being able to write proposals. The federal government will give you millions of dollars for your labs or for your projects. Being able to write, being able to speak, being able to present, those are skills that every single student, regardless of major, should do. I find STEM students are the most lacking in that regard. And to be honest, being able to advocate for yourself and being able to relay your ideas are critical on college applications for all students. But I find that most of my STEM students, they tend to separate out between those things. Can you work in a team? Are you comfortable with the unknown? If you're not comfortable with the unknown, you want to go into the STEM fields, you might need to reevaluate some of those things. Are you okay with not being perfect? Can you fail? How do you handle that failure? I think, Taylor, you can wrap us up with some of the ways you see that in the still.
So I read, again, for the College of Engineering, I read over 1,000 applications each year. And there are very many differences on the spectrum of strength of the curriculum, the strength of the extracurriculars, the strength of an application overall. I think these 6 points that Nicole just went over are what I'm inferring from an application. What did the student take advantage of in the lens of their high school? It's been interesting in the past few years as the students in high school that are going through the application process now are kind of our COVID class. It impacted every single year of their high school career. But what were they taking advantage of when we were in lockdown? I have students that created hydroponic systems in their bedrooms. I had a student that transformed an old aquarium that she found on the side of the road when the neighbors were cleaning out their basements. No basements here. So I grew up in the Midwest, so I live here. No basements. Cleaning out their garage, they created a whole simulated different types of weather to study erosion within an aquarium. We want to see a student that is going to be able to ask those questions, can advocate for themselves, and can really get creative. I think sometimes in high school, students will just find themselves in class, I will learn this, but did you enjoy it? What pieces could you pull out from that you want to learn more about? Were you just handing in, completing the worksheet, handing it in, and not really wanting to dive in more? Kind of ask those questions of where your interests lie. And then also from an extracurricular perspective, what do you like? I was listening to a podcast and the interviewer was asking the person being interviewed, where do your passions lie? What drives you? And the person's like, I like to be outside. What can I do in the lens of my job, my career interests, and kind of tying in those interests too? Just because there is something available and kind of like an extracurricular, like, well, what should I do? What's going to get me into college? What do I do? But it's really being an active participant in this whole process is really going to be helpful for students when they get to the point of the fall of their senior year and they're going through this application process. So kind of inspire yourself. I was a student that I was like, I'll take physics because my friends take physics. Did I like physics? I had no idea. But did I like my teacher, Mr. Halbert? Absolutely. Did I maybe attend Purdue University because my math teacher, Mr. Bachman, was there? Maybe. I don't know. But did I love math? I started liking proofs, for goodness sake. That's like the worst part of math ever.
I love you.
But Mr. Bachman. Also, okay, here's some really helpful resource links. Nicole and I used to do this presentation with the ASU rep. This is a really helpful tool.
I love it. It's one of my favorites.
Best tool. The majors at Purdue, this is really nice because you can filter obviously by alpha order, also academic college, but also career interests. That question of, I want to study business, but I don't like math. It's going to be pulling maybe those non-math heavy majors into that list too. Also, the career mapping and visualization system, that word. Also, just because you study engineering doesn't mean you're going directly into engineering as a career. The health and human science realm is really interesting as it's going to things like engineering, it's going into things like education, it's going into the public sector too. And then Collegewise back to some.
Again, if you guys like to copy the slides, feel free to mark them. Otherwise, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you leave feeling a little less stressed. Taylor and I can talk about this for days. Okay, I can talk about this for days. I don't know about you, maybe hours. Are there any questions now? Yeah.
So one thing we've seen in STEM discussions, first kids off the school,
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it's great. So,
Off the payroll yet.
Right, one more year. And so we've got another one about to head out, and the same conversation that I heard 20 years ago here today, which is engineering schools are overloaded, lots of folks applying, and so UCSD had talked about how it's a small population of the overall campus. Has there been discussion about expanding that component, based on the fact that there's such a high demand signal, and the engineering school typically generates some significant revenue with research?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat back the question I think you asked. Engineering and science are new programs that are massively overwhelmed. Is there talk about expanding things? I think the answer is always yes, but let's talk about like kind of the bottleneck issues, right? One is space. If we're doing engineering, I need lab space. I need very specialized equipment. I also can't have multiple kids in a lab because there's nothing scarier than 100 students around the Bunsen burner. Right? I can't believe they let them access that here underage. But I think the second problem, in all honesty, is that we can't get the faculty. There's a huge shortage of computer science faculty to the point where you are now seeing universities partner with places like Google, like at UT Austin, where they essentially split jobs. We cannot get, unfortunately, for the folks that we need to train our students, we are not paying them enough relative to industry. So it's kind of both a chicken and egg problem, right? I'm running out of room at some of these campuses, but I also can't get the bodies I need in the rooms. So what does that mean for your kids, right? Why do we care about that for you? It means, I think, especially from a parent perspective, one, recognizing that there is a great education for engineering in many, many places. Some of my favorite places, Arizona State, ASU, or just like that, ASU, University of Arizona, University of Utah. Oftentimes I think we in California look coastally because that's like the places where we're most happy. Let me tell you, the Midwest has some of the best engineering you can possibly imagine. University of Minnesota, there are 12 of the top 15 Fortune 500 companies and those big, huge medical organizations, right? So I would say, in terms of like the space capacity constraints, I think that's a very West East Coast phenomenon because so many of our kids just want to stay there, so it's this perception, right? UC San Diego, I don't know, I think they're going to try to be like 100,000 people at some point. I feel like they're just constantly adding more bodies and like everyone's sleeping under a tree, it feels like, right? It's ridiculous. But if we look at other places, you actually have a lot of really great programs that actually don't have enough students. So I think it's on us as like parents and as educators to really encourage our students to look beyond the top 50 or however we define that. But then of course there's actually the problem that we do not have enough people going into that industry, which is why you're seeing some of that constrained capacity at certain campuses. I know, we want to make sure you guys can go to your next presentations as well. So feel free to leave if you are wanting to go.
Class dismissed. If not, we'll figure out. We do have another presentation in 7 minutes, but our cards are up here, if you would like cards, and then thank you for actively participating and attending.